Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. Mock Draft Monday. We're changing it up a little bit. We're not looking at a mock draft. We're not doing our own mock draft. We've done plenty of that. We're getting into our preseason 2023 NFL Draft position ranks, and we're starting with the wide receiver position. It's a deep class. I have a good idea of some of my top prospects on the board, but kind of that 3 through 5 range was a little difficult. Dill, I'm going to kick it off to you, but before we do, I just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support you guys have shown the channel. Over 1,000 subscribers. We've had a blast talking football with you guys in the comment section. So if we leave one of your players out, let us know in the comment section who we need to be checking out. We appreciate the support. If you do like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'm going to kick it off to you. Who's your fifth wide receiver coming into the 2023 NFL Draft?
I think right now I have Marvin Mims as my number 5 guy. And what I think he is a guy who works the whole field, really does everything well that you would want, but probably not like a high-end athlete who's going to make a ton of explosive plays. Not that he can't do it, but I don't think it's going to be a big part of his game in the NFL. So I think you're going to get more of a dependable, solid, but do everything kind of wide receiver. So I think he's my number 5 for that reason.
Yeah, I had him as an honorable mention, and that was left out of the top 5 because of some of those reasons that you said. I don't think the production was there for me to be putting a guy like Marvin Mims in my top 5. Who there's a lot of guys who the production is there when they're not necessarily the highest upside players, but they have the production. So that's why Marvin Mims didn't really make the cut. I'm going to go with a guy who has the production, and I think is one of the more exciting college football players in the country. And that's Josh Downs from UNC. He's a guy that unbelievably twitchy. And we're going to talk about some guys that are really good producing on the field, but don't really have that juice, that twitchiness. Josh Downs kind of does it all. Twitched up. He separates off the line of scrimmage extremely well. His get off is very, very good. Very good on those quick hitters, those quick screens. Sam Howell in that UNC offense absolutely force-fed him the ball last year. Like 150 targets. He's also tough in the middle of the field, is what you want out of like kind of a slot guy. You got to be able to catch in the middle of the field. Some of the questions I have is he really was schemed up touches, which is sometimes concerning when you're projecting into the NFL. You got to have a guy who can create his separation himself. The physical tools to create separation is there. It just seemed like he was really, really schemed up touches, which I don't blame that UNC offense to do. He's absolutely.
The problem is he was feasting on balls caught behind the line or within 10 yards, really. I don't think you saw him working the deeper portions of the field or having to run through long progressive routes. So that's like a Marvin Mims, I guess, he's a guy who was doing kind of everything. He wasn't relying on catching the ball behind the line of scrimmage and running. He was working the field. He was open in a lot of different places. And that's probably why I think, Josh Downs is obviously the better athlete, way more electric with the ball, but I don't think you saw enough pure wide receiver play, and I think he had a little bit of drop issues at times this year.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't. He's definitely not a boundary receiver. He's not an outside receiver. So you don't see him necessarily running those vertical routes. He can because he has the speed. Like he'll run sub 4.4. He has the speed, but it's not part of his game. And that's why he is the 5th receiver in my ranks, because I think there's a lot of value in the slot game projecting to the NFL. You're seeing NFL teams use slots more and more, like slot receivers more and more in production. And so I think he can be a top 5 receiver in this class. I do want to see him kind of complete what you were mentioning, kind of become a complete package as a wide receiver, and maybe show that he isn't just like an option route in the slot kind of guy, not a guy that you just need to scheme up touches for. Dill, your 4th guy.
I think number 4, I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston. And I think he's a really good player. The thing is, I think the top 3 for me are also really good players. So I don't think there's a ton downside to his game. I mean, a huge, huge player who is good and more than just vertically. So I think that's something you look for when you're that big, is can you catch the ball inside of 10 yards pretty consistently? I think he could. I think when you saw him run like comeback routes or various routes on the edge, he was typically very open. So I think what you got is a really big player who can do the kind of the average wide receiver things while also being able to get vertical and make plays in the air.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about him because I'm going to be talking about him a little bit later because he is a little higher up in my boards. My fourth receiver, Kayshon Boutte, a guy that I love him. I love his game, but I want to see it a little bit more. To start off with the pros, he's really, really good after the catch. He has a track background, and he doesn't necessarily seem like the most explosive guy, but he just runs away from guys in the SEC. He's got the speed. Catches the ball over the middle of the field extremely well. I think he showed that in the UCLA game extremely well. The cons really are the injuries. I mean, he had a second ankle surgery after the season-ending injury, and it's just the question marks of can he stay on the field? And he was a guy that was just held back by an abysmal LSU offense. But it's never good when you're having multiple surgeries in the offseason at such a young age. I really just want to see more. And then an X factor that I don't normally bring in too much, especially this early in the draft process, is Brian Kelly, who I'm not reading too much into this, said something along the lines of, yeah, he's a good kid. We just have to get him more engaged. I'm not too it was basically insinuating that Kayshon Boutte wasn't as focused as he would like. And there were question marks of like, oh, is he going to be like a starter for you guys? Which is absolutely wild. But again, Kayshon Boutte, there's a lot to like. Dill, I think he's in your top 5, so you'll be talking about him a little bit. But yeah, Kayshon Boutte, he has a lot to like. Dill, is he a third guy?
No, he is not my third guy. My third guy is Jordan Addison.
Okay.
And I think Jordan Addison's like a more athletic version of what I see a Marvin Mims type player. Bigger, a little more athletic, probably better with the ball, but another guy who's open at every level.
Yeah.
And just plays the position really it just seems like a very high level all across the board. And the one concern I think you might have is, I mean, he was playing with the best quarterback in the game last year, and Kenny Pickett made some very good throws when he wasn't wide open. So that maybe is one of the concerns is he wasn't doing it like maybe a Kayshon Boutte who was on a very weak offense and who was making a lot of plays himself and shouldering a fair amount of the load. Whereas Jordan Addison had a lot of help, obviously, with Kenny Pickett, and he broke onto the field, the stage, if you will, and played really well. But I'm not sure he's got the gas that maybe my top 2 guys have.
Yeah, Jordan Addison actually is also my wide receiver 3. And a lot of the things you mentioned, I kind of echo. He's a complete wide receiver. Like he wins in the short and intermediate routes, but he also can press the field. And your concerns with him are also kind of stuff that is what I had in my notes was a lot of the production when you're watching him came against like teams like New Hampshire. And he's not necessarily – I have a little concerns about the strength of schedule, and I don't know if those concerns will be answered as he goes to the Pac-12. But again, he's a guy that the production speaks for himself. He gets open. He catches balls. He's very, very good after the catch. I had a little comp Devontae Smith where he doesn't have like the juice of like a Jamar Chase kind of guy where he's going to be a clear wide receiver 1 at the next level. But Devontae Smith's a similar guy where it's like he just makes it look so easy. And it's not like, oh, I'm blown away by the film, but it's like he's catching for what? 100 catches, 1,500, almost 1,600 yards, 17 touchdowns. And it just seems easy for him. And I don't know if that's just because he's playing a weaker ACC teams or he's just that good like Devontae Smith was where it seems easy, but he's just the best player on the field. And so I like Jordan Addison a lot, but he's not quite in my top 2 because I think the 2 guys I have in front of him offer a little bit more of that juice that I'm looking for. Dill, who's your number 2 guy?
I have Jaxon Smith-Njigba as my number 2.
Wow.
I think what he's able to do catching the ball, he just makes the right decisions right when he catches it. He spins the right way, he cuts the right way, and gets a lot more than just catching the ball and getting tackled. So it's probably one of the first things that jumps to me is just his instincts at the position. And another guy who's just open constantly, seems to find holes in the zone. Did a really good job on Jackson Hill at Michigan, who was playing really well in that nickelback role. So I think he's just and I guess the last thing is he doesn't drop anything. Everything that comes to him is caught. He makes contested catches even though he's not huge. So I think he's really a prototypical, like that's just a really great wide receiver. And I get like people think he doesn't have the speed and the athleticism that maybe people think their top wideout should have, but I think it's a little bit of that like Chris Olave. He's just a wildly smooth player who, yeah, it doesn't look hard. It doesn't look like he's flying, but people aren't catching him from behind typically, and he can get vertical and make plays. So I think he's almost a perfect wide receiver. Maybe you just want a bigger, stronger, more athletic frame.
He's also a guy that, he doesn't seem that physically imposing, but he's like stiff arming guys off of him. He's really good after the catch. And you're right. The concern, like, he doesn't jump out with the speed, but similar to Kayshon Boutte, who I think you have as number one, nobody catches him. Like, if he has a step, like, he's gone. Nobody's really catching him from behind. My number two is not Jaxon Smith-Njigba. It's Quentin Johnston from TCU, a guy that this is a little bit of a projection. In my notes, the cons are you haven't really seen it on the field. I mean, last year he only caught for 634 yards. And with the season before, it was even less. Like, he's not a guy like Jordan Addison, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Josh Downs, who have shown it already on the college football field. But there is so much to like in this kid. And with Sonny Dykes taking over at TCU, I think you're going to see him explode onto the scene. He's not in many people's top fives because that production is low. But some of the things that I like about him is that he checks the size box. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. He plays to that size. He goes up and makes those catches. I mean, against OU, he was just mossing pretty much any DB.
Yeah, he was a force.
He's a boundary guy, which is going to separate him when you get down to like March and April. When you're talking about who is the best wide receiver in this 2023 NFL draft, is he can play the outside, which is a lot of question marks for a guy like Jordan Addison, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Josh Downs, where it's like most of their production is coming from the slot. It's Quentin Johnston also, and this is really what separated him and made me put him in the top two, is 6'4", 210 pounds, but his movement skills are absolutely off the charts. He creates separation maybe better than Drake London. And he's also, after the catch, he's kind of a monster. I'm not making the Drake London comp, but when you saw Drake London work after the catch, it wasn't because he's super twitched up and making guys miss. He's like Thanos, just like shrugging people off. That's what Quentin Johnston was doing after the catch, and he has burners. He won't have a problem with the 40-yard dash that Drake London had.
He's another guy like in the Smith-Njigba kind of vein where he just has a presence to him when he catches the ball and makes the right turns the right way, runs the right way. All like those kind of things, I think that they matter because you're changing 10-yard plays into 20, 30, potentially touchdowns. So the more you can make that happen, and at his size, that's very impressive, I feel like, because it's harder to make good, clean cuts and do those type of things when you're that size. But he does have that athleticism to do it. So.
And then your number one, Kayshon Boutte?
I don't like this guy. Gigantic. He just looks huge on the field.
Which is not weird because I looked at the chart and he's – because I gave him like an A.J. Brown comp. Sorry to interrupt you, but how he works the middle of the field is like – he kind of seems like A.J. Brown. He's really physical over the middle of the field. He bounces off tackles. And then you look at his height and weight, which admittedly Arno was accurate. He's only 6 foot, 195 pounds, which was extremely surprising.
Well, that's a pretty thick guy. I mean, almost 200 pounds at that. Because he doesn't look giant tall, but I mean that's almost as heavy as Quentin Johnston. He's 4 or 5 inches shorter. So I think that's what of course he's not a giant with height, but he looks strong. He looks like a really handful to deal with physically, like maybe like not a Jamar Chase, but I mean you see Jamar Chase's size is a huge problem for guys, especially with the way he can run. So I like that he's got what it looks like to me, a big physical frame, and he can fly. Like you saw him make big plays, and he's an acrobatic catcher. So I think what he does, I think, is he's probably the best runner with the ball, pure runner, I would say. And I think he's probably the most explosive athlete on this list.
Yeah, there's a lot to like in his game. And again, the reason I had him at 4 was I just need to see more, and the injuries are concerning. I mean, like having 2 ankle surgeries, and it's also like, as much as I love him, I'm concerned about the offense that he's in and like how well he's going to be able to portray those traits, because that LSU offense last year was an absolute joke. So hopefully with
and
BK
they'll
coming
probably be
in,
bad again. So.
better quarterback play. I hope that he's able to flash those traits like Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, those kind of guys are, because guys like Quentin Johnston and Kayshon Boutte just weren't really able to show what they can. It was just a smaller sample size because, one, they both had injury issues. Two, their offense sucked. And so they just weren't able to kind of put up the numbers that they were capable of. I mean, Kayshon Boutte was a guy that was putting up All-American numbers until he got hurt in a horrible offense. So if he can stay healthy for all 12 games, hopefully plus 12 games, I think there's a high chance that he's a top 3 wide receiver in this draft. My number 1 guy, A.T. Perry, just kidding, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And it goes beyond, you kind of made the concerns of, how's the breakaway speed? Is he twitched up enough? I don't really care. And it's kind of the Chris Olave conversation we had last year. I think that's a great kind of conversation to have, is he's just the best wide receiver in the country, and it doesn't take you long to realize that. And then the questions are, how good will he be when Olave and Wilson aren't on the field? Guess what? He answered that too against Utah in the Rose Bowl. I'm putting up like stupid numbers. I think he broke a bowl game record with the receiving yards he had. And everything just seems so easy to him. And he's got great feel for the position. He knows how to create separation in man coverage. He's also really good at finding space in zone coverage. Him and CJ Stroud, the chemistry that they developed, and it was really fun to watch over the 12, 13 games that they played, was really, really special. And I'd look for that to be continued. And he's going to be that number 1 wide receiver, I think, because I don't see that offense slowing down. I don't see Jaxon Smith-Njigba slowing down. And the only reason he's not taken first at the wide receiver spot is because those nerd NFL GMs are going to say, we have questions about his speed or how twitched up he is or his top end ceiling. He's the best player in college football, best wide receiver in college football.
He's not doing it in the FCS, which I feel like, if you're doing it at the FCS and playing like him, you probably want to see physical freakiness because it matters. But it's like he's playing against pros game in and game out, and he's torching them.
And you mentioned Dax Hill and DJ Turner. He was going to work on some guys who Dax Hill went in the first round. DJ Turner is probably going to be like a day 2, maybe day 1 draft pick next year. He's doing it against really, really good defensive backs at the highest level of college football in the Big Ten East, which is about just as good as any conference you'll see. He's a special guy. Dill, I'm going to kick it to you. Did you have any honorable mentions who you wanted to throw in that top 5, but they just didn't crack it?
I mean, naturally, Josh Downs is, and I know you touched on him because he's clearly very good. I think the 2 Maryland guys, Dante Demas and Raheem Jarrett,
I have
are interesting because they're both big, freaky athletes. And maybe if that team can take a step forward, you'll hear their names creeping up a little higher. And then the last guy I had was Parker Washington. I just think he's very Marvin Mims, like just open anywhere he wants to get open, and just played really solid football. And he's got sticky hands, catches the ball when it's thrown to him.
I think Parker Washington might find his way in the top 5. And again, you didn't put him there because the production was actually decent. I believe it was 800 yards, but Jahan Dotson kind of took over that offense. And I could see that offense, if they still can't run the ball, I could see Parker Washington putting up the numbers Jahan Dotson put up because he's really, really special. And he's thick. Like, he's short, but he's an absolute thick dude. A couple guys that you didn't mention, I had Raheem Jarrett, I had Dante Demas, who I'll touch on. If Dante Demas recovers from that injury that was absolutely gruesome against Iowa, he's special because he, like Quentin Johnston, that 6'4" frame, but his movement skills are also really, really impressive. So I look for him if he can kind of rebound and answer those questions with that gruesome injury. He certainly could be a top 5 guy. A.T. Perry's one who just another Wake Forest guy, kind of like Jaquari Roberson, who doesn't get enough attention. Caught for 1,500 yards, 17 touchdowns. He's 6'5". He's a guy that I think will put together another really good season and kind of get his way into that discussion.
And that's premier vertical football. Like he's really good getting over the top on teams.
He's one of the best in the game. Tank Dell from the slot. Again, I just couldn't put him over guys like Josh Downs and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, but he's got that twitch. Like he's really good with the ball in his hands. He creates separation well. And then one other guy, Jaden Reed from Michigan State. He's really good with the ball in his hands. And then I just have to shout out Ronnie Bell. I hope he comes back from that ACL injury.
Shout out Cornelius Johnson too. frankly.
Shout out all of them. AJ Henning. Shout out all the Michigan wide receivers.
But Ronnie Bell and Cornelius Johnson don't get nearly the respect they deserve. Especially, like, I can get a little bit Ronnie Bell because he didn't play this year. But Cornelius Johnson put together a really good year and was a very, like, the guy on third down when Michigan needed him, he was always there for him. And I think he's a guy who can kind of do it all. Big, athletic guy. You can work the middle of the field, can get open on the boundary, and can take you deep. So
he's a guy that if J.J. McCarthy is the starting quarterback for Michigan, I think
he's first rounder.
Yeah, I think. But he's just, if Cade McNamara and that offense kind of looks the same where, I mean, they do. They have the best offensive line in the country, very good running backs. If they kind of take that approach where we're going to ground and pound you, I just don't know if Cornelius Johnson will get that opportunity to show really what he's about. But again, this wide receiving core I don't think is as top heavy.
Also, Joseph Nagata, I want to reference because if he can get some help from those players or those quarterbacks, he's really good.
Yeah, we saw that in the spring game last year. He's kind of a freak. They need to play.
They give him nothing.
They need to play good offense. That'll do it for our top 5 wide receiver ranks. Again, you're not going to see some of those freak wide receivers that I think you've seen in years past. It's still a very good class, and it's still a very deep class. Like, some of the guys that I have on my board are, like, really good players. It's just they're not the Jamar Chases that I think people have come to expect out of the wide receiver group. But still a very exciting class. We appreciate you guys checking us out. We'll be back next Monday with the running back rankings. So we're kind of getting into that 2023 NFL draft flow. We appreciate you guys checking out the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.